October 29, 2018, Lion Air Flight 610 is taking off from Jakarta, Indonesia. It's 6:20 in the morning, a 1-hour flight is expected with very good weather. Not even 2 minutes pass before the plane begins to report failures, with the nose of the aircraft tipping down repeatedly without any input from the pilots. The pilots report these problems to Air Traffic Control, or ATC, reporting that they cannot determine their altitude because their onboard systems have failed. From this point onwards, the aircraft would automatically dip its nose more than a dozen times, and each time, the pilots would manually recover control. Up until 6:32 a.m., when the nose dips again. This time, the pilots are unable to regain control, and the aircraft is heading straight into the Java Sea. Not even 5 months would pass before the same scenario repeats during a flight in Ethiopia. Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302 takes off from Boeing International Airport in Ethiopia's capital, bound for Nairobi. It's 8:30 in the morning with pretty good weather. Three minutes after takeoff, the aircraft shows the same issue as the previous flight. This time around, the pilots are able to identify exactly what is causing the aircraft to pitch its nose down. They manage to disable the stop trim system, and the nose-down tendency appears to stop. However, the stabilizer is now stuck in a slightly downward position, and the pilots cannot gain altitude using the yoke, so they decide to reactivate the stop trim system. When they reactivate it, the aircraft re-engages the nose-down system, known as MCAS, and the aircraft becomes uncontrollable, crashing into the ground at approximately 900 kilometers, or 600 miles. This Boeing model, called the 737 MAX, was first introduced in 2017 to compete with its European rival, the Airbus A320neo. Since designing an entirely new aircraft would take about a decade, Boeing chose to stick with a trusted airframe, attach a much more efficient engine, and launch it with minimal complications. They did this to save years of engineering and regulatory processes. If Boeing classified the aircraft as a completely new model, it would need to go through the FAA's entire certification process from scratch. So instead, Boeing labeled it as the same aircraft, just with a different engine, thus avoiding all those rigorous processes. However, this larger, more efficient engine introduced changes in the aircraft's physics. The engines had to be positioned higher and further forward, which caused the aircraft to have a stronger nose-up tendency during the ascent. So what did Boeing decide to do to counteract this aerodynamic issue? They created a new software system that would push the nose of the aircraft downward violently for 10 seconds at a time, without pilot input, as long as the system was active. This system was called MCAS, Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System. Up to this point, the concept itself might not be the problem. The issue is that Boeing never informed the airliners purchasing this aircraft about this new system, which ultimately killed over 340 people. Before Lion Air Flight 610 in Indonesia, this system had never been disclosed to the pilots. These pilots were battling an invisible enemy. They had never heard of this system, nor had any clue of what it was. In the second crash in Ethiopia, the pilots had just enough time to recognize the issue was being caused by the MCAS, but they were still unable to save the aircraft. The tail stabilizer got stuck in a negative position, which forced them to re-engage the system, and once it was on again, it was completely unmanageable. All airplanes have external sensors to measure basic flight data. One of these is the angle of attack, or AOA sensor, a small vane on the nose of the aircraft that measures the pitch angle based on the airflow direction. If this small sensor is damaged or malfunctions, it can send incorrect readings, which would automatically trigger the MCAS. In both accidents, the AOA sensor was found to be damaged. To make it even worse, MCAS only takes input from a single AOA sensor, even though most modern aircraft have 2 or even 3 of these. The 737 MAX has 2, but MCAS only uses 1, which made the system highly vulnerable to incorrect readings. Before the new millennium, Boeing was known as a world-class engineering company, a pioneer in aviation since the jet era began, starting in the 1950s with the Boeing 707, followed by the 727, and then the iconic 737 in the late 60s. Boeing was proud of its high standards in safety and engineering, and rightly so. They created the super famous Boeing 747 in the late 60s, a plane that still flies till this day. Boeing continued to lead the world in commercial aviation until the late 1990s, when the events that led to its downfall began. In 1996, Boeing acquired McDonnell Douglas, and the two companies merged into one. The then CEO of McDonnell Douglas became the CEO of Boeing, meaning that McDonnell Douglas effectively took over Boeing. What was once considered an engineering powerhouse became, in the words of insiders, an accounting firm trying to please Wall Street. With the new leadership focused on financials, Boeing began operating like a company driven by shareholder returns. Wall Street demanded results, and Boeing needed to show profits, so Boeing was pushed to behave like a company that prioritized the stock market performance. According to Boeing employees who worked before the merger, they said, "They ran the company as if they are building washing machines. Every plane had to be cheaper, the number of employees was reduced, and they expected more with less." Before the merger with McDonnell Douglas, we never cut corners. That wasn't our mindset, no shortcuts. If you do it right and improve quality and safety, profits will come. The new CEOs and executives after the merger had one mission: increase the stock price. They insisted that aircraft development timelines be met no matter how. That meant keeping essential safety processes to save time and money. To speed up production, they removed quality inspectors and quality managers. There was only one quality inspector for nearly an entire building per shift. We used to have 15. These metal shavings can cause fires or short circuits in the aircraft's wiring systems. These planes rely heavily on wiring, so any short could mean total system failure. Boeing whistleblowers reported that anyone who raised production safety issues would be fired, suspended, or transferred. They told us not to document anything so they could maintain plausible deniability. They didn't want anything in writing. My salary was cut for raising safety concerns. A year after the final MAX 737 crash, Boeing released all internal documents to the media and investigators, fully exposing the failures, corruption, collusion during the development of this aircraft. In 2014, Boeing began designing the 737 MAX, essentially the same plane but with different engines. These new engines had to be mounted further forward and higher on the wings to compensate. Boeing installed the MCAS, but since MCAS was a totally new system, the FAA would require new pilot training. Boeing's response? If we emphasize that MCAS is a new feature, we will face greater certification and training requirements. So Boeing decided that it had to pretend the MAX was essentially the same aircraft, when it wasn't. They said, "Externally, we will say it's just an enhancement to the speed trim system." Pilots were already familiar with the speed trim system on earlier 737s. So, before the first crash in Indonesia, Boeing chose to hide the very existence of this system from everyone except the engineers developing it. This shows a culture of secrecy within Boeing, but there is still more. Before launching the MAX, Boeing had discovered through its own simulations that if the aircraft wasn't recovered in under 10 seconds, the outcome could be catastrophic. But only if the pilot was trained on MCAS. That means Boeing knew in advance that this system could lead to the deaths of everyone on board and still chose not to train pilots on MCAS. In a 2017 internal message, the chief technical pilot for the 737 MAX wrote, "I want to emphasize that there will be no need for any simulator training. Boeing will not allow that to happen. We will fight any regulator who tries to regulate us." These internal messages were exchanged with Lion Air in Indonesia, who even asked, "Wouldn't it be safer to have additional training?" Lion Air wanted more than what Boeing was offering for safety. Boeing's answer was, "There is no reason your pilot need MAX simulator training to start flying the MAX." After the first accident in Indonesia, the FAA performed a TARAM analysis, which calculates the risk factor of aircraft accidents. The result? If the issue wasn't fixed, there could be 15 more fatal accidents. That meant one fatal crash every 2 years, making the MAX potentially the most dangerous commercial aircraft in history. And the results of this are visible. Boeing has fallen behind its main rival, Airbus, not because Airbus is remarkably better, but because they haven't committed these atrocities. The growth of Airbus, its rival, was stable and consistent over time. The big mistake was Boeing's own. In trying to prioritize its stock price, they achieved the opposite, taking their stock from 420 to 150 at the time of making this video. Everything that once made it a pioneer in modern aviation was abandoned out of greed by merging with a company run by accountants and focused on financial growth instead of continuing to be the safest mode of transport ever created.